Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video. In this video we're going to be going over the 2-week benchmark of this league and what I've been up to, what I've been playing, etc. I'm mostly focusing around Cyclone my league start, but in some future videos I'm going to be putting basically some showcases of some other builds I played, as I think that'll be kind of interesting for people to see. But this video is just going to be the league start and the Cyclone, which as you can see in the background, which was a very solid league starter. I saw the buffs in the patch notes, and we're like, hey, 20% more damage, that's very solid. Like, you could league start before and was fine, now it's even better. Let's definitely give that a shot and see how it goes. And it performed much better than expected. Part of that, I think, was due to the league mechanic, just because the league mechanic is very powerful in terms of item generation and being able to create really solid upgrades for your character. But at the same time, I didn't go in knowing that, right? Because we hadn't really experienced the Genesis tree. So I figured even some uniques like a Hegemony's Heir or something like that for a staff would be completely fine as a unique. And then if I could find an upgrade later or craft something later for a staff, that would be fine. But it turned out to be even better. So day one was very successful. We basically did a lot of pushing, a lot of mapping, and kind of show a screenshot here of getting our 2 Void Stones in essentially on day one. And that was really big. Felt really pleased there. It was really great progression. Not much was needed in terms of upgrades, and I'll go over the POB in a bit, but we basically didn't even need to upgrade our staff, essentially, after hitting white maps. Like, we just gambled for it off of, I think it was Faustus for the gambling, yeah, that's all we needed to go through T16s and get our 2 Void Stones, which is fantastic. So very successful overall, but the Cyclone build did evolve over time, though, from the league starter, as I wanted to try out essentially just some more advanced versions of it, putting in some more investment to see how it would feel, and started bossing a lot, especially doing like Maven invitations and making a good amount of currency there, which is fantastic. Surprisingly, Cyclone actually ended up being a really good bosser, because the thing is, when you're mapping on Cyclone, is that although there's a nice area around you which you can map, your clear isn't necessarily too insane, but it's really good with shockwave support, which you're going to be running in your Cyclone, because you can, 1, trigger it very fast, and 2, you can also stack it up. Stack it up meaning that you're not attacking for a while, and then you unload on a single target, so being able to deal a good amount of burst damage. And so surprisingly for bossing, that worked out really well, because especially with Maven teleporting around and such, I could basically jump on her, do a good amount of damage, she would teleport, my shockwave would stack back up, and then I could continue dealing more damage to her next time I got on her. So it was a really efficient burst window where I could do a lot of damage, and the tankiness was really solid. Definitely not anything like really tanky on the spectrum compared to, like, I don't know, like anything with like a much higher hit pool or like super high evade or something, or block for mapping, but it was still very solid, and it was plenty in terms of doing like T16, 16.5s. Didn't really try 17s on the earlier investments because I wasn't too interested in that, but I don't think it would have had the gear necessarily to complete them, especially like on the day 1 POB, there's no way. But the idea was more, again, for farming Maven, because that was a little more interesting to me. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go over the POB now and kind of show off the gear, things like that, what you could look for, especially if you're starting the league late or Cyclone looks interesting, because it's really easy to gear early on. So I'm going to go ahead and go over that. Alright, so going over the POB, this was the day 1 POB that I had set up, and I kind of took a screenshot or snapshot of it, of what I basically had on day 1. So you can see this staff here. This was my day 1 staff. This is something I gambled in white maps from Faustus, and it basically is a % fizz, flat, and attack speed. The mana and shock don't matter because I'm fully fizz, and the extra mana was nice, I guess, but it's something if I removed, wouldn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things because my mana is already high enough on the build. So there's nothing else to really cast that costs that much, so it doesn't really matter. Rest of these pieces are life and res gear, and you'll notice as well, there is no Eldritch currency on any of this, and even no Anoint either. Again, this was day 1 gear, so even though I could have done some of this stuff, as I did have the currency to do so, there was no need for it, and then just get some really nice damage jewels, because day 1 of a league, there's a ton of jewels, you can just get a ton, so it's just like crit multi, stats, damage, a little bit of like reduced chill, because that was something kind of annoying for Cyclone, but it's just a general stat to get, but like very flexible in the jewels, so which is really nice. With the Slayer setup, it also felt very comfortable to map and boss on, because of the fact that you basically have a really, really nice ascension path where you're grabbing Impact and swapping to this in the early acts. I leveled Sunder until then. You pick up Impact, big AoE for Cyclone, you level the rest of the way and use it. Secondly, I went Bane of Legends. I think Bane of Legends second is a solid big damage power spike. You don't really need the Overleech yet because you don't have the hit pool to really like not sustain it but make use of it. So going this on 3 is most likely the correct call. However, me being a little bit more comfortable with melee, I went for Headspin on 3. So meaning as I was coming to maps, I had no Overleech but pure damage. This allowed me to spike really, really early damage-wise and in combination with the staff here, and a 4-link did not have this 5-link till later, like in red maps. It felt really, really insane for progressing because I was just spinning and dashing. I had a Frostblink in here, essentially, and that will keep up your Cyclone. So you can Cyclone Frostblink pack to pack, which is really, really clean, and basically do a ton of damage, which is fantastic. And then on Uberlab, we ascended for our Overleech, which for the purposes of this build, the Overleech didn't matter too much. It was just for a little more of the reduced damage taken. I think early, if staffs didn't have such high crit, which unfortunately they do, Overwhelm would be really, really good. Or trying to do some like Masterful Form, like get some frenzies, get the endurances and all that. That definitely could have been an option, but I was fine to just go Brutal Fervor and call it today. I think that was like really, really solid and felt very, very smooth. Again, that's all I was caring about is smooth. I didn't want any hiccups in the build, and I got none of that doing this progression, which is fantastic. I also need to do minimal respecking as well. If anything, this is basically the tree I leveled with and spec'd into, which was fantastic. So there really wasn't any of that. Also, something to think about is part of the tree is very, very, I should say a decent part of the tree is, which is like modular, I guess. You could like change around a decent amount of it. So I prefer to go for a little more block, like getting these hanging nodes and some recover on block, even though I have low block nonetheless, just because multi-hit mitigation was something I was struggling with. But the thing is with multi-hit mitigation is that as much as these nodes were nice, if I were to take them out and do something like this and be sitting, pretty low level here, requiring like level 84, that would have been fine. Like I could have gone to earlier clusters, which is something I do in my day 2 POB. But once again, day 1, you're just chugging along, and until there's actual problem, I'm not really willing to fix it in the sense. Not a matter of like I don't want to plan ahead, but also if I don't need to fix it, then I should just keep progressing. And that's what I felt overall on the build, which is very, very nice. So once again, no Eldritch Implicits, it's just life and res gear you are going for, which is fantastic. Now, the thing is with this POB is that although it is very, very bare bones, it's very, very effective. And again, this 5-link was just swapped later on. When I did Eater and Exarch, I believe both, though, were done, I think, on a 5-link as compared to a 4-link. Because I think I swapped to it right before I did a little bit of living. I think that was like my brutality coming in here, being a bit lower level than the other stuff. But I do not quite remember if that was the case. But it was a very clean boss fight between the two. Like, tons of damage, easy to shred through, tank most of the abilities. It was very, very chill. Very, very simple setup here, so I'll leave the POB for this. And then the day 2 one, which the day 2 one we will get into now. Alright, so this is the day 2 POB, and so this is where things actually start to ramp up quite a bit in damage. So this is where things like the shockwave starts to come into effect. So this is something I didn't have on the full DPS on my other one, but nonetheless, comes in here as a very, very high damage amount. As you can see, like this is basically dealing with damage of our full Cyclone before, and now we have a Cyclone on top of that, which is insane. And this is our 6-link setup on day 2. We have this custom mod here, as you can see in the config. This is for the graphs before they were introduced to POB. And I was using, I think it's called Violent Desire to get Impale Chance and Impale Effect. But I wanted to kind of undershoot my POB and see where I was, as opposed to overshooting in this case. And it felt really, really good. And this is where I was definitely fine, like farming bosses and such. It definitely took a bit, but I'm also very comfortable with Maven. So again, it wasn't really that big of an issue. Tree was generally the same, I think, for the most part, except for this large cluster jewel. So this is where I was looking for, number 1 is weight advantage. This is an insane staff node. You get the 4% double damage, which is great, very, very cheap to pick up. Although this is a 3 passive, you could opt for a 2-1, especially if you want to save your currency early on. Martial Prowess being really, really good because it gives you that accuracy, which you generally always need if you're not RT, so it's just really nice to have. Frees up some gear pieces. Attack speed, attack damage, just fantastic, and the elements don't matter because we're just Fizz and we don't care about the bleed. It's very, very low anyways. And then Drive to the Destruction is just an additional kind of placeholder there, so it's just solid damage, but it could be whatever. Nice thing about this, though, is that it does basically instantly apply maim because you attack so fast, so it's kind of nice for slowing mobs down. which is very, very nice. So I don't really have a problem with that. In terms of the gearing, though, you'll notice this is the same staff, but we've just increased our damage a lot. And this is generally due to just a repath on the tree, a little bit of upgrades in terms of our Eldritch currency on gear at this point, getting an Anoint, which is huge on Forceful Skewering, playing into that Impale, which is really, really nice, and we go harder into that later. And again, just a 6 link, some gen levels, that's really, really big. And yeah, that's really about it for day 2. As you can see, a little bit more on the jewel action too, but otherwise config should be roughly about the same. Again, I'm just kind of importing what I was doing for bossing. You'll notice I even have like Pride for maximum effect, because again, I'm just going to be sitting there bossing, so that was a little more applicable to me, whereas for you, might be like initial effect for mapping, but nonetheless, again, it was plenty, and this is plenty for, especially if you're all can going T16 mapping, like this was completely fine. So that was really, really good. So that was the day 2 POB, and we will now go on to a little more powerful of POB when we made some bigger upgrades. Okay, so coming into the much bigger POB here, this is where I'm basically just demolishing all the Guardian bosses at this point, like any pinnacles, if you're doing like formed rotations, whatever. And the content is basically falling over for the most part. Big change here was adding an additional cluster. As you can see, getting more damage here, and especially getting Overlord. This is one of the single most strongest notables, especially for staffs, because it is basically a 1-point fortify, which is insane. And that coupled with, I don't have it yet in this POB, but a Rune Graft of the Warp increases your fortify duration. So if I 1-pointed here, let's say, for like life, and then, or actually I'd transform it beforehand here, and I would go Warp. And they're not expensive either. Choose anything and have this. That increases your fortify duration, gives you that uptime during bosses, which is really, really nice. Along with also, especially for Maven, reducing the duration of the Maven's Punishment, which is like cutting off all your regen, and then also does it the same for the Brain. If you manage to hit that, like the Brain Beams, that reduces like your max res. Although actually, I think maybe both reduce your max res. Anyway, plan is not get hit by in the first place, but this is kind of the backup for helping things expire faster, and also pairing that with the Arcali Pantheon if you want is really, really good for it. I just put in Lunaris for mapping. Anyway, graphs still not in POB yet, but basically at this point, these are a little more honed in. So this was Violent Desire, and Violent Desire is the Impale graft, and then I think the other one was, I think it was like Tender Embrace, and that was basically getting endurance charges and more life recovery rate. Keep in mind, more life recovery rate is a multiplier on your healing, so your life regen and your leech. So basically I could get down to below half, it would proc, and then I would basically gain a ton of healing, which was fantastic. So yeah, the damage goes up by a lot. Notice the staff is the same. And later on, I eventually upgrade to a big staff, but this is where I kind of want to halt on the Cyclone process, because beyond this point, it's where you want to take it. It's basically getting a bigger damage staff, and then figuring out if you want to get like additional auras through Enlighten, getting some synthesized rings, not for like Frenzy Charge or anything, because that does get a little expensive, but more so towards things like the Circle of Guilts for, I think they're called Circle of Guilts, and it should be for like Herald of Purity scaling, Circle of, should be Guilt, I think. Yes. And you can end up rolling damage on these and buff effect and getting a ton of damage that way. And then obviously eventually going Giga Endgame with like Mage Blood and such. But you can get this damage really, really high, probably like 200 million or something like that on Cyclone min-maxed. And that's like way more for, I don't know what you need to kill with 200 million DPS, but it's really, really strong. So it's a really, really nice setup. In terms of gear, big thing I want to point out here is, yeah, we have our implicits, yada, yada, but the plate, the Astral Plate. This is on the body armor where you can spend a lot of time upgrading and trying to get this honed in really nice, because you want socket attacks on minus 15 mana cost, and you also want attack-based crit, and that's not something I even have in here, and that would help a lot. And so that's just through an Awakener Orb, or you can buy it on Trade Site, whatever works for you if you're not a crafter. But what's nice about it is you can start out with the basic version, as I'm doing here with the socket attacks, then you can move up to socket attacks with crit, then you can go up to the elevated version, which is giving you more base crit, and also immunity to stun, and immunity to stun allows you to take this out. It can technically be a little annoying if you're not cycloning and then you get stunned, but in general you're going to be cycloning, so this is generally just a free point, which is really, really nice. Rest of this gear, though, is roughly the same, if not just anointed. And that's really about it, which is really, really nice. Getting a Stygian Vice here, which is really nice. And being able to fit in another jewel is awesome. And again, it's just more jewels, more crit multi, all that to continue scaling your damage. This is where the build feels fantastic. And it's not that it didn't feel good beforehand, it's just now it's smooth. It's just, you're a blending machine, you just cut everything up, which is fantastic. And that makes this a really, really potent killer for a lot of things. Like, you can do most invitations in the game. So if you wanted to farm like Form, Twisted, you'd absolutely delete it. You're farming like Maven, you delete it. Same thing with Shaper, Elder, whatever. Like, you just spin on it and it dies. It's very, very simple. And you can map on this setup as well, because you actually have decent defense. Even though you don't have much in terms of like armor or evasion, you do have endurance charges. And let's see here. I'm not set up on this. So this setup, that's right. Yeah, for bossing I didn't have this, but you can go into stamina, and then you can also anoint vigor as well on this. And then with this node up here for endurance charge on melee critical strike, you basically have like 5 endurance charges, and that alone is like plenty of physical damage reduction, honestly, coupled with your graphs. And having Fortify, and having reduced damage taken from leeching. Most Fizz is just going to bounce off you anyways, unless you have like some crazy map roll or something. So yeah, it's really, really straightforward, which is super nice there. And then Frenzies, I don't have it checked, but you can get it for like Blood Rage and such, which should be in this setup here. Yeah, and then you check on Frenzies, you know, when you're mapping, and that's like even more damage. So yeah, you can get a lot here, which is really nice. But yeah, this is like my final Cyclone POE for this. And I know when I was like doing some bossing and things like that, again, even without all the conditionals on, you deal plenty of damage, and your mapping is very, very solid. Once again, the crazy thing is, this is on like a 500 DPS staff. So if you manage to find, like, yeah, it's got a decent crit roll on it, but if you manage to find something better than this, then your damage just goes through the roof, and it's absolutely crazy. So very, very cheap gear overall, and very, very accessible if you want to just farm it up and buy it on trade, or upgrade the character incrementally. That's no problem at all. So really, really good stuff there. So yeah, that's about it for my Cyclone League starter. Since then, though, I have played a couple more builds, and I will be kind of sharing those. I won't be going as in-depth on those, if at all. I'll more just be posting footage like, hey, this is stuff I've played. But also, I want to be going over a new series, which will be really good. It's going to be Zero to Hero series, but it's going to be a much more edited Zero to Hero series, and also it's going to be something that hopefully is enjoyable and also relatable to people. Hopefully this content's a little more relatable as well to people, because like last league I posted like whatever it was, like the all content trickster, and it was like 8 mirrors or something or whatever, and it was kind of like, okay, that's a little much for people. Although I did receive a lot of messages and things like that, and I always keep my Discord open for messages like, you know, like, hey, I'm working towards a build, and people farming towards it and then playing in, having a good time and everything. And it was like, that's awesome. So love that stuff, and still going to be releasing some high-end builds this league for sure. But at the same time, I do want to do something a little more approachable maybe for the average person. So we'll see how that kind of goes. So anyway, that's it for this video. That's kind of the update. Once again, if you have any questions or anything, just post them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to respond to them. And hopefully this just gives some Cyclone insight, because also I got some messages from people being like, hey, I think Cyclone's really cool. Where can I go from here? In terms of like, they started Cyclone and they just want some upgrade paths. And hopefully this will give them a little more of an angle of what to go towards, especially in terms of budgeting out like what they want to upgrade, because this really isn't bad on the gear. And then once again, some high-end builds, but also a Zero to Hero. So yeah, looking forward to the future. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.